Toby Keith passed away at the age of 62, but what he left behind was anything but quiet. Behind the familiar cowboy hat and the anthems that made millions of Americans cheer stood a man who always walked a fragile line between admiration and controversy, between blazing fame and pains he never fully voiced. He was not just a country star. He was a phenomenon, and also a question without a complete answer. Toby Keith's talent arrived early and erupted with ferocious force. He wrote songs that could shoot straight to the top of the charts, built a sprawling empire of music, business, and image that very few country artists ever reached. Yet that same bluntness, that refusal to compromise, that instinct to never bow down, also led him into constant collisions with the industry, with fellow artists, with the public, and with himself. A success never came gently. It dragged along pressure, isolation, and decisions that made him both celebrated and condemned. Behind the applause lay a journey marked by loss, family shocks, years of being pushed to reshape his artistic identity, and finally a long battle with illness where his body gradually betrayed a voice that once shook stadiums. Toby Keith was never meant to be a flawless hero. He was a complicated, contradictory man who lived fiercely by his own beliefs, even when the price was solitude. Toby Keith's story, therefore, is not merely a story of fame. It is the journey of a man who dared to live large, dared to endure pain, and left behind a legacy that is at once dazzling and haunting. The way Toby Keith entered the world of music was so forceful that people often forget that before becoming an icon, he was once a child growing up in spaces that were deeply ordinary, deeply quiet. To understand why he chose a path of no compromise and no retreat, one has to return to where everything began, not on a stage, but in the silent summers of a boy from Oklahoma. Toby Keith Covell was born on July 8, 1961 in Clinton, Oklahoma, into an ordinary working-class family with no glamorous artistic legacy. His childhood was shaped by frequent moves between Fort Smith, Arkansas, and Moore, Oklahoma, small towns where life revolved around labor, discipline, and early self-reliance. There were no spotlights, no expectations of stardom, only a slow, practical rhythm of life and a very clear understanding that survival required work. At the most significant influence on Toby during his formative years came from his grandmother, who owned a small supper club in Fort Smith. Each summer, young Toby was sent there, not for leisure, but to help out, clearing tables, mopping floors, observing adults. It was in this unvarnished setting that he first encountered live music. Not music idealized or romanticized, but guitars and voices performing for people who were eating, drinking, and talking. Music there was not distant or sacred. It was labor, sweat, a means of making a living. That understanding stayed with Toby Keith for the rest of his life. At the age of 8, he received his first guitar. No one saw it as a sign of a future artist. It was merely a pastime among many responsibilities. At school, Toby took sports seriously, especially football. After graduating from Moore High School, he went straight into Oklahoma's oil fields, doing heavy labor as a derrick hand and eventually becoming a supervisor, an environment that forged physical toughness, grit, and a habit of not complaining. At that point, music was not an escape, but something that existed alongside manual labor. And it was precisely this parallel existence that formed the psychological foundation of the man Toby Keith would become. An artist rooted in real life, carrying the mindset of a working man, and never treating music as something that required bowing to anyone for permission. And music did not come to Toby Keith as a romantic refuge. It seeped into his life in a state of struggle, running parallel to long shifts among drilling rigs and the thick stench of crude oil. After high school, he followed the familiar Oklahoma path, into the oil fields. starting as a derrick hand and gradually working his way up to supervisor. It was a world where a single misstep could mean serious injury, where people learned to endure in silence rather than complain. That habit took hold in Toby Keith early. Get the job done, stand your ground, then think about dreams. At 20, he formed the Easy Money Band with friends. They played in bars, roadhouses, and stops along the honky-tonk circuit, places where audiences didn't come to listen, but to drink, laugh, and make noise. The music had to be loud and forceful enough to cut through the clatter of bottles and glasses. There were nights when Toby would be in the middle of a song and receive a call from the oil rig, forcing him to leave the stage mid-set. No resentment, no dramatization. Just the practical choice of someone who could not yet afford to live off music. In 1982, Oklahoma's oil industry collapsed. Jobs vanished, and what once felt like a solid foundation suddenly became empty. Toby turned to football, a pivot that may sound impulsive, but was very Oklahoma. He tried out for the Oklahoma Outlaws, but didn't last. And he later played for the Oklahoma City Drillers at a semi-professional level, just enough to keep a fading athletic dream alive. His body could take the hits, but his mind no longer believed this was where he belonged. The decisive choice came quietly. Leave football behind and commit fully to music. No connections, no backing, no one waiting for him in Nashville. Only songs written from the rhythms of working-class life, a voice strong enough to overpower barroom noise, and the stubborn endurance of someone already accustomed to losing jobs and starting over. Toby Keith entered the music industry through the narrowest door, where if you didn't push yourself forward, no one would pull you along. And that starting point shaped everything that followed. Blunt, rigid, unapologetic, and unsparing. Music as another form of labor, only harsh in its own way. Crossing the threshold into Nashville, Toby Keith did not carry a glittering, discovered story. He carried a song. In 1993, Should Have Been a Cowboy erupted like an early, a precisely timed blast, striking the collective memory of country radio and thrusting a new name straight into the center of the game. Fame arrived fast, too fast. The debut single topped the charts, followed by a string of albums throughout the second half of the 1990s that all went gold or higher. A growth curve any record label would want to lock into place and replicate. But it was precisely there that pressure began to tighten. Country music was entering its pop-leaning phase, its edges sanded smooth to suit mass taste. Suggestions to adjust came more frequently and more subtly. Soften the rhythms, dull the barbs in the lyrics, smooth out the roughness of the image. For someone shaped by oil rigs and noisy bars, that kind of molding was not a strategy. It was a prolonged, uncomfortable way of living. The music still sold, but the feeling of being pulled away from himself made every finished song feel like a concession. In those years, Toby Keith did not shut himself off from the world. He allowed himself to experiment, to place his voice into meetings that seemed, on the surface, contradictory. In 1997, at the collaboration with Sting on I'm So Happy I Can't Stop Crying opened a different space. A country artist stepping into a broader aesthetic zone without trading away his identity. The song earned his first Grammy nomination, a measured form of recognition, but enough to affirm that he was not merely a product of radio. Yet the paradox still hung in the air. Commercial success continued, while his inner life kept colliding with the question of who was really steering the ship. Songs completed during this period carried two opposing forces. On one side, a formula already proven to work. On the other, the restlessness of a songwriter determined to keep his own voice intact. Crowded stages, pressure-filled studios, and an ever-clearer sense of being asked to reshape himself. That tension ensured that Toby Keith's power curve was anything but smooth. It was uneven, compressed, storing force, waiting for a moment to strike back. Pressure accumulated to the point where there was no way back. When songs continued to be set aside simply because they were deemed off direction, Toby Keith chose to do what very few artists at the time dared: buy his own right to be himself. The $93,000 paid to terminate his contract was not a large sum for corporations, but for an artist still having to prove every step, it was the price of freedom, a gamble both cold-blooded and deeply personal. He left Mercury not in a posture of victory, but with the mindset of someone willing to accept loss in exchange for the ability to breathe. And then, the answer arrived faster than anyone expected. In 1999, How Do You Like Me Now burst out like a direct reply. No detours, no asking permission. The song did more than climb to the top of radio. It became the #1 country song of the year 2000, pulling the album of the same name into the role of a living manifesto. There was mockery in it, pent-up resentment released, and a very human pleasure, the satisfaction of someone once doubted returning to the center of the spotlight. The album received major honors, including ACM Album of the Year, a symbolically charged milestone forcing the industry to reconsider its own judgment. That comeback carried Toby Keith to DreamWorks, seemingly opening a cleaner new chapter. But the paradox quickly revealed itself. Familiar power lines resurfaced, and bringing with them the very atmosphere he had wanted to escape. The sense of the old forces returning was no longer rumor. It was daily working reality, where creative decisions still had to pass through filters that were anything but friendly. Even so, the balance of power had shifted. This time, he stood at the top, armed with an undeniable hit, an award-winning album, and a position strong enough that he could no longer be pushed into a corner as before. Amid those frictions, music remained the weapon. Songs written during this phase carried the rhythm of regained confidence. Not a showy bravado, but the quiet assurance of someone who had reclaimed control over his own path after paying full tuition. Stages grew larger, studios felt less suffocating, and every release decision bore the imprint of someone who had learned the most expensive lesson of his career. Freedom is not granted, it has to be taken. After reclaiming control, Toby Keith accelerated in a way that was distinctly his own. In 2001, Pull My Chain arrived without fanfare, but with cold efficiency. His first album to top the country charts, followed by professional recognition at the highest level when he was awarded CMA Male Vocalist of the Year. This was not merely a reward for vocal ability, it affirmed that the rough, an unpolished energy he pursued had a solid place within a Nashville landscape that was itself shifting direction. Then the world changed its breathing rhythm. External shocks poured into the American cultural atmosphere, and Toby Keith's music responded immediately. Unleashed, 2002, shot straight to number 1 on the Billboard 200, carrying with it a song that would frame his public image for years to come, courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, the Angry American. The song made no attempt at moderation. It was blunt, sharp-edged, and willing to absorb impact. For part of the audience, it spoke the words they felt unable to say. For others, it became the spark for controversy. At the same time, the line between art and political stance was pushed to its edge. Each spin on the radio reactivated opposing emotions. The winning momentum surged further in 2003 when Shock and Y'all arrived like a double strike, dominating the country charts while simultaneously breaking into the pop charts. The album revealed a more multifaceted Toby Keith within the same tense moment in time. Beer for My Horses, a duet with Willie Nelson, held the number. One spot with endurance, both playful and defiant, powerful enough to drive gatherings to their peak. Grammy nominations for the song and the collaboration confirmed its professional weight. American Soldier slowed the heart rate, placing the human being at the center rather than slogans. I Love This bar turned an everyday space into a collective symbol. Weed with Willie sneered at conventions altogether, as if reminding listeners that seriousness is not always the answer. Amid that run of victories, the angry American image gradually solidified, forceful, divisive, resistant to compromise. The stage lights grew brighter but also harsher. Every song choice simultaneously became a positional choice. Toby Keith moved through that light and shadow territory without avoidance, letting the music absorb the friction and allowing the charts to speak for themselves. The forward momentum did not slow as 2005 arrived. Honky Tonk University emerged as a confident declaration from someone accustomed to standing at the top yet unwilling to stand still. There, Toby Keith placed himself alongside Merle Haggard, a meeting of two generations, not to prove anything, but to affirm that a line of tradition still carried real pull. As Good as I Once Was rose as an intriguing paradox, self-mocking about age while displaying enduring vitality, then remaining at number one, long enough to become one of his most durable hits. The song's video, humorous, grounded, rich in narrative detail, earned CMA Music Video of the Year, once again demonstrating that Toby Keith won not only through melody, but through telling the right story in the right way. In 2006, White Trash with Money appeared to recalibrate the balance, and the party anthem still carried enough fuel to energize crowds, but between them lay quieter moments where listeners could sense that behind the laughter was an artist who had absorbed enough friction to no longer hide his inner contradictions. By this point, the music no longer needed to prove its commercial strength. It reflected freedom of choice, choosing when to be raucous, when to pull back. Also in 2005, a structural move changed the entire landscape. Toby Keith founded Showdog Nashville, later becoming Showdog Universal Music. This was not simply a new label, it was a shift in power. From the position of someone waiting for approval, he stepped into the role of deciding release schedules, strategy, and creative space. That autonomy altered the working rhythm. Faster when necessary, slower when desired, and most importantly, no longer needing permission to be himself. That position also opened doors beyond music. He stepped into film, carrying with him the same blunt spirit that had defined his career, not avoiding reactions, not fearing judgment, as long as the right to choose remained his own. Within that new space, Toby Keith operated as a center of gravity. Music, image, and then business decisions revolving around a single axis: control. The stage lights remained bright, but behind them stood a structure he had built with his own hands, strong enough to withstand both applause and headwinds alike. Once control was firmly in his hands, Toby Keith did not stop at music. He ventured into film as a way of expanding territory, not to prove himself as an actor, but to test how far his storytelling language could travel. In 2006, Broken Bridges marked his screen debut, a role set within a family everyday context, where emotions were kept restrained, with no need for display. 2 years later, Beer for My Horses appeared in stark contrast, loud, heavy-handed, steeped in the familiar barroom spirit. The film was harshly criticized, dismissed as crude and flat enough to make even fans hesitate. That collision did not push him into retreat. It merely confirmed something long familiar in Toby Keith's career. He accepted being judged as long as he retained the right to choose his own path. Running parallel to those experiments was a long-term commitment that was more enduring and far less noisy in the public eye: performing for the military. More than 200 shows for American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan were not media highlights, They were repetitive, exhausting, and, at times, dangerous schedules. In 2008, a USO tour in the Persian Gulf with 18 nights of performances exposed the fragile boundary between entertainment and field reality. Some nights had to be halted due to incoming fire, then resumed once it was safe. Not as an act of heroics, but as the familiar habit of getting the job done that had followed him since his oil rig days. Within that current, career numbers ceased to be goals and instead became byproducts. 5 albums that reached #1 on the Billboard 200, tens of millions of records sold, some sources citing over 25 million, others exceeding 40 million, reflecting reach across multiple market cycles. 61 singles released, 20 reaching #1, 22 entering the top 10, 7 Grammy nominations, 14 ACM awards, including 2 honors as Entertainer of the Year. Those figures did not erase controversy, nor did they conceal cinematic failures or cultural clashes. They simply set a frame of measure, an artist operating amid noise and risk, where every choice carried a cost and every step forward left marks too clear to be ignored. From makeshift stages and dust-filled USO tours layered with the pressure of fame, Toby Keith's private life moved to an entirely different rhythm, quiet, durable, and sparing in words. Trisha Lucas entered that orbit very early, before music became a career capable of supporting them both. They met in 1979 in a small Oklahoma bar, when Toby was still dividing his days between oil rigs and late-night gigs. There was no repeatedly retold fated moment, just the pull between 2 young people who recognized in each other a similar kind of resolve. That relationship matured under conditions far from romantic. Trisha grew accustomed to waiting for him to finish shifts, waiting through long trips, waiting for decisions whose outcomes were unclear. 4 years later, in 1984, they married, at a time when Toby had not yet entered Nashville with any guarantee at all. Married life began with carefully weighed expenses, quiet evenings after heavy work days, and the constant uncertainty of a man who did not yet know whether music would truly open its doors. As his career accelerated, the family rhythm was stretched along with it. Trisha did not remain outside the spotlight because she was pushed away, but because she chose to preserve a different order for the home. She brought with her a daughter from a previous relationship, Shelley, whom Toby adopted, and later the family welcomed Crystal and Steelen. Raising the children unfolded in a space with little display, without turning them into appendages of fame. The peak years, with dense touring schedules, continuous studio work, and public pressure, were not always smooth. Tension existed as a condition of living. Prolonged absences, decisions made from afar, nights spent carrying the household alone while tours were still underway. During the most controversial phases of his music, Trisha played the role of someone who did not engage with the noise, yet bore its full weight. She witnessed the fatigue accumulating after each media cycle, the moments when Toby withdrew inward to conserve energy for the next night on stage. Family became a quiet anchor, not healing through advice, but through steady presence. There were no public ruptures, no dramatic breaking points to recount, only a relationship moving together through many states, from anonymity to overwhelming fame, from spotlight to days of failing health. A private life running parallel to public power, giving Toby Keith a place to return to when the lights went out. Amid the relentless rotation of stages and unforgiving schedules, there was a quieter current that gradually shaped Toby Keith's choices. Unloud and uninterested in applause. In 2004, the first point of contact came through Ali's house, a space partially built to honor Allison Webb, a young girl who passed away from Wilms's tumor far too early. The pain of a child does not end with mourning. It compels the entire surrounding system to change course, from how it thinks to how it acts, so that other families are not left alone in endless hospital corridors. 2 years later, the Toby Keith Foundation was established with a very specific mission: providing housing for pediatric cancer patients and their families, a need that may seem small but determines the dignity of treatment days. At the end of 2013, OK Kids Corral opened its doors as a real home, not a cold, temporary shelter. Over 10 years, more than 5,000 people passed through those rooms, arriving with fear and leaving with a measure of peace. Fundraising efforts ran steadily. Toby Keith and Friends Nights, the golf classic, raising more than $15 million, enough to turn goodwill into functioning infrastructure. With the foundation secured, the scope of support expanded. In 2018, the foundation relocated to Tulsa to be closer to the community. In 2023, a comfort kit vehicle began traveling to rural hospitals, carrying warm blankets, activity kits, and audiovisual equipment. Scholarships for siblings of pediatric cancer patients, art therapy, ward improvements, medical equipment grants. Each piece was placed where it was missing, in a distinctly practical way. Throughout all of this, Tricia Lucas was present as the keeper of rhythm. The work did not appear on posters, but on hiring lists. Social workers, program coordinators, event organizers. Meetings with families happened face-to-face. Evenings were spent helping children with homework. Holiday meals were delivered door-to-door. Arrangements for parents to receive free tickets, gatherings with volunteer athletes. Everything was aimed at giving children back the feeling of being children, even while IV lines were still there. Toby Keith appeared in the most unexpected way, walking into rooms, picking up a guitar, letting music slip past the tubing. He sang, spoke a few brief words, and left behind a promise that was unflashy, yet lingered for a long time. "Keep fighting. I'll see you on stage one day." Those words traveled beyond the room, becoming a signal that helped adults hold on for one more day, that helped children believe another scene of life was still waiting. From hospital corridors where OK Kids Corral warmed each family, that current continued branching in another direction, not for display, but to sustain the ecosystem that had formed around the name Toby Keith. Numbers appeared before the public as an almost unavoidable byproduct. Forbes once described his income level as very high, for many consecutive years exceeding $48 million annually, with some years reaching $65 million. The phrase, the $500 million man, circulated alongside other estimates placing his net worth around $400 million, differences that did not alter the essence. This was an artist who converted cultural pull into durable cash flow. His living space reflected that clearly. Dream Walk-in Farms, roughly 300 acres in Norman, Oklahoma, was not merely a residence, it was an operating structure. And the approximately 10,000 square foot home opened at the back onto a crescent-shaped pool, a private bar, an outdoor projection screen, and a water slide. Details showing how music was installed into daily life. Paths looping around the lake, a liquor cabinet arranged like an exhibition, and a bar lined with memorabilia, all turned a song into a room one could step into. A thoroughbred horse operation ran alongside the raising of cattle, pigs, and turkeys for online sale, a distinctly Oklahoma way of grounding luxury in labor. His mechanical habits spoke volumes as well. Ford trucks, the 2015 F-150, the F-250 Super Duty, the F-450, were not just vehicles but declarations of pulling power and durability, from towing capacity to cabins built for long hauls. Alongside them sat a classic 1932 Ford Deuce, a symbol of manufacturing history and the pleasure of preserving long-term value, a slow rhythm placed next to modern machines. The brand empire expanded according to the same logic of bringing the song into everyday life. I Love This Bar and Grill launched in 2005, then spread across multiple states through a licensing model with Capri Restaurant Group, not to control every detail, but to amplify the experience. The TK Steelman fashion line, 2009, brought a plain-spoken aesthetic into fans' wardrobes. Wild Shot, 2011, became a signature drink, a moving alongside bars and stages. At every point of contact, music did not stop at the ears. It became tables and chairs, glasses and conversations. Fans did not merely consume, they gathered into a community, stepping into spaces designed so that the feeling of being at home could continue after the song ended. That current of power was acknowledged through official milestones, quiet in tone, but heavy in weight. On January 13, 2021, Toby Keith received the National Medal of Arts, a national-level recognition for a career that was both controversial and culturally far-reaching in rare ways. Earlier in 2007, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame had named him as one of the state's distinguished sons, placing his music and work ethic within the fabric of local history. By 2023, the People's Choice Country Awards presented him with the Country Music Icon Award, a moment both formal and intimate when the public audience, not only industry insiders, affirmed a symbolic status forged over decades. Behind those honors lay a quiet battle, long, grinding, and more erosive than any tour he had ever endured. In late 2021, his pain began to surface in an elusive way, not sharp but persistent enough to throw off the rhythm of daily life. A succession of medical tests led to a diagnosis no one wants to hear: stomach cancer. When Toby Keith disclosed his illness in mid-2022, it did not trigger a public explosion. It felt more like a door that had already been closing in silence, only becoming visible at that moment. Treatment unfolded in uneven stages. Chemotherapy, radiation, then surgery. Each step drained strength, forcing the body to relearn responses once taken for granted. There were days when results brought tangible hope, followed almost immediately by mornings of exhaustion, where simply standing up was a challenge. He described the period as a roller coaster, moments of emotional lift, followed by steep drops. The prolonged COVID-19 pandemic kept stages dark even longer, turning nearly 3 years into an involuntary pause. Not only because of treatment, but because the world itself had slowed to a halt. Surgery affecting the diaphragm directly altered his voice, the tool of a lifetime. Breath became shorter, projection weaker. Every line had to be recalculated. Rather than conceal it, he adapted, lowering keys, pacing phrases, and accepting the new limits of a recovering body. This was not surrender, but preservation, holding on to what mattered most: the ability to stand before an audience as himself, even if changed. That was why his return to the Las Vegas stage at the Encore Theater carried a different weight. No complaints, no lengthy explanations. He completed the full set, held the band together, then stayed behind signing autographs long after the crowd had left, as if time itself no longer allowed for haste. His final Instagram post, a single short line, "And that's a wrap," appeared shortly before everything closed. On February 5, 2024, Toby Keith passed away in his sleep at the age of 62. After more than 2 years battling stomach cancer. A quiet ending, consistent with how he chose to face his final days, without explanation, without dramatization, letting music and presence speak the rest. After his passing, the family asked that flowers be replaced with donations to OK Kids Corral. The appeal spread along ordinary paths, small bars, churches, Our radio fundraisers, news outlets reported $2 million raised in the first week alone. Nashville held a public memorial at the CMA Theater with montages, a memory wall, and a candlelight vigil. The crowd collectively sang "Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue" as a reflexive act. In April, the CMT Music Awards devoted part of the program to tribute. Bartenders mixed Toby Keith shots. Radio stations in all 50 states aired his full catalog. In Oklahoma, flags were lowered on public buildings. The University of Oklahoma handed out red Solo cups at a basketball game, an image that spread rapidly as a cultural symbol. Trisha's breaking of silence did not come through statements. It came through action, taking over board meetings, speaking at galas, meeting families weekly, wearing his denim jacket as a symbol of carrying the flame. Amid the memorial lights, the work continued, not to let memory stand still, but to keep it operating, the way Toby Keith had chosen to live and work until the very end. Toby Keith has left the stage, but America has not stopped debating him, singing along, or remembering him. In modern country history, few artists have been both so fiercely loved and so deeply divisive, not because he was ambiguous, but because he was unmistakably clear. Clear in his stance, in his voice, in the way he stood upright in the crowd and said what he believed was right. Over more than 3 decades, that Toby Keith left behind not only dozens of albums selling tens of millions of copies, long strings of #1 hits, CMA and ACM trophies, and repeated appearances on Nashville's biggest stages. He left behind a rare model of artistic autonomy in country music, writing for himself, owning his own label, turning songs into lived spaces, and turning listeners into a community. His music was not ornate and did not evade confrontation. It spoke plainly, sometimes roughly, but always touched something real in the American working class: pride, anger, humor, and resilience. Yet Toby Keith's legacy does not end with his voice. It lives on in the brightly lit rooms of OK Kids Corral, where families of children fighting cancer find shelter, in performances staged in deserts for soldiers far from home, in the way he kept stepping onto the stage when his body no longer fully obeyed. He did not build the image of a flawless hero. He let every crack show, and that is precisely what gives his story its weight. Toby Keith is not immortal because he avoided controversy. He endures because he chose to live true to himself, paid the price for that choice, and never asked permission to be who he was. When a small bar suddenly fills with "I love this bar," when someone raises a red cup and sings along to "Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue," people are not just hearing a song. They are hearing the imprint of a life lived all the way to its edge. Which moment of Toby Keith stays with you the most? A song, a night on stage, or a simple everyday image? Share your feelings in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to continue joining us on this journey of exploring lives that have left marks impossible to erase.